My name is Detlef Grumman. I've been a woodworker for about 20 years, and in the last 10 years I've gone from doing ordinary things to working on higher-end furniture. And most of my designs, I'm sitting on one right now, are relatively clean lines with a little bit of curves, Asian influence, a little bit of influence from the arts and crafts period of the early 1900s as well. I've been doing this seriously for about a decade, and I'm primarily self-taught. You learn by doing, by talking to others, but mostly by just practicing over and over again, getting the work just right. The bench that I'm sitting on here, it's made entirely of solid wood, our local big leaf maple, and most of my work is in fact made of solid wood, and I do like to use many of our local woods, arbutus, big leaf maple, Gary oak, whenever the possibilities arise. There's also other local trees like London plane and chestnut that may not be native trees but sometimes come down in the urban environment. This particular bench is one of my favorite designs. It's very comfortable to sit on. The finish, as I always insist on, is absolutely silky smooth. Hand-rubbed oil finish. It features mortise and tenon joints. In this case, there's a wedged mortise and tenon joint at the far end of the bench, which you can just see. The stretcher of the bench comes through, and there is the tenon comes through. Example of what it looks like. This is the tenon that you see coming through the end. There's a couple of wedges that are driven in after the tenon is put into place that separate the tenon. Makes a really strong joint that can't come out. The cabinet is an original design. It's very loosely based on some of the arts and crafts designs out of the early 1900s, but again with an Asian feel with the curves. I like multiple influences in my designs to sort of create some unique furniture. It features open. They can have shelves inside there. I happen to use this for storing boxes myself. Again, it's made with traditional joinery techniques. There's mortise and tenon joints throughout. The top has a feature called a breadboard end, where the grain of the end board is perpendicular to the main top part. The wood, if you can see here, there's a slight offset. This is what happens. Wood moves and contracts and expands, and this, the way the construction allows this to happen without cracking the wood apart.
Here actually is one print that I've made of these three plates before letting the ink dry, and this is the print, and in reverse here are the plates that I've now allowed to dry and put them into this table, and now no more prints will be created from these three plates. They'll stay on the table.
And the table itself, it's made of big leaf maple or western maple. It's entirely solid wood and constructed using traditional joinery techniques.
I'm going to explain a little bit about the technique of photopolymer gravure etching. We start with an image, usually photography, but it doesn't necessarily have to be so. This is an example of one that is being worked on today, and we make a transparency of the image. This transparency gets laid onto a plate. This plate has a different image right now, and this plate is steel with polymer on the surface that is photosensitive, and we lay the plate in this heavy light box. We lay it here in this contact frame with the transparency over the top, and then we expose it to ultraviolet light. It's not plugged in, but anyway. Expose it for a few minutes. The plate gets sensitized and the image gets transferred onto the plate, and then the plate gets inked up. So now I'm going to demonstrate the inking of a plate. Here's the plate with the image on it. It's an image of a farmhouse with a little horse in front. So I'm going to start dabbing the ink onto the surface. And because of the nature of the plates being so small, and because you have to get the ink into the grooves, you can't paint it like you would a traditional painting where you would, carefully outline lines and shapes. You kind of have to blend the colors together and basically put a lot of ink on at the beginning and then remove a lot of it, because you're just trying to get the ink into the grooves, and then you take it off the surface. So I'm just very quickly dabbing some colors, not worrying too much about what goes where for this demo. Trying to put in just a slight idea of where I want the colors to go, maybe a bit more red over here. Alright, so once the ink is dabbed on, then we start rubbing it in, and we rub it into the grooves and slowly cover the entire image. And I put on quite a bit of ink. The ink is oil-based paint that has been, comes very thick out of the can, and it's thinned a little bit with burnt plate oil, which is an oil made specifically for etchings. So it's burnt and it's cooked in a way so that it doesn't become rancid and change color, and so the color that you place on your plate will remain true over time. So there, I've dabbed the paint in very quickly into this plate, and now I'm going to remove most of it. And what I'm using is now phone book paper to remove the ink. So just lightly rub off the excess ink off the surface, bit by bit. When I've done this a few times and there's very little ink coming off of the paper, then I start to go into it a little more carefully, and I start rubbing away with the flat of my hand, because I'm trying to take the ink off the surface and not out of the grooves. And the more I take away, the more you can see the image starting to reappear. With printmaking, a lot of the creativity comes actually in the inking, depending on what colors you lay, how you lay them, how you combine them, whether you go into it later on with a brayer and cover it up with other layers of ink afterwards. You don't want any thick ink left over on the plate, because it'll be squeezed and it'll end up getting smudged when it goes through the press. So in order to get the best image, you basically have to take off a whole lot of ink till you can't take off anymore. So that was was quickly done. So I'm just going to hold it up, show you a little bit, and do just some final touches on the edges. And I'm also going to clean off the edges because there can be some thick ink on the edges that will then smudge when it goes through the press. And see, there's extra ink there. So I'm going to clean that off. This is a very light sky. If I wanted to, I could have left it darker and left some swirls of color. But I'm just cleaning it off as it is. And now I'm going to bring it over to the press and lay it down. I've got my registration sheet, so I know exactly where to lay it. And now I'll prepare the paper. Here I am. I'm thoroughly soaking the paper on both sides. And we do this so that the paper is softened. Even though I am using oil-based ink, it'll still be transferred to the paper. So I've totally wet the paper, and now I'm going to blot it dry.
What type of paper you use?
This is printmaking paper. The brand is Magnani Pesce, which is an Italian brand. It's very beautiful, thick, absorbent paper. So now it's ready to go to the press. Okay, so then I lay it down according to the registration. Protective newsprint over the top. 3 felt blankets, each do a different job of pushing the paper into the grooves of the plate. And then we run it through. Okay. So you can see here the indentation of the plate on the paper. If ever you see a print in a show or anywhere else, if you see an indentation, you see it more clearly on the front side, you know that that's a hand-pulled print and not something produced photographically. And there's the image. And there's the indentation. See, I had quite a bit of blue up there in the sky. Red barn, black horse. Somehow it all worked. Even though I looked like I was just smudging everything together, it all worked. And there we are. So just a bit of information about how we sign prints. If we do an edition, we'll sign the edition 1 of however many we do. Say we do 5, 1 of 5, 2 of 5, 3 of 5, 4 of 5. If we do, if we pull a print like this, where the way the color is distributed and the way we've inked it is unique, then we will call it 1 of 1. And because this one has a repeatable matrix that I can do again, this will be considered a mono print. If I were to do, say, an image on the back of the plate, or on a smooth plate where there's no repeatable matrix, there's nothing etched in, and I just ink something up, run it through, then that becomes a monotype because there's nothing repeatable whatsoever in this. And this one here, I'm going to make it 1 of 1, and it's Winter Warmth, because that's the title I've given this image already. And this is going to be number 2 of Winter Warmth, even though it's 1 of 1, because number 1 was just black and white. There was no color in it. And then my name on the right-hand side. And that's the numbering. And sometimes you'll do an addition, and the addition has a slight variation, but it's close enough to be an addition. So after the numbers 1 of whatever, you'll put another little symbol, and that it'll be E/V, which means addition varié. So it's slightly varied addition. Sometimes artists will pull a couple of prints that are not exactly, that are part of the edition, but maybe just a little bit special, and those will be the artist proof. And usually you don't do more than 20% of the edition. So if there's an edition of 5, you do 1 artist proof. Sometimes you'll be practicing with colors first before you decide on an edition. And when you come to the one piece that you say, yes, I want to do an edition all like this, then that one will be BT, which is bonnet tiré. They're all French terms, but which means it's good to pull. So this is how I want to do it now. And these are all old traditional printmaking labeling that has been around for a long time, that other people use for other things too now, but that's a little bit of an explanation of the writing and the labeling.